Well, I could get this started by telling you that this was a book that was not intended to be a book. I didn't know I was creating a book for 6 months. And then it dawned on me with a conversation with a friend of mine from New York that, oh, you might have something here. And I still dismissed it for months and months, even though I kept on doing what I was doing during COVID. And I'd like to say that I think the book is so enriched by Jeanette's cover and illustrations. And I met Jeanette back before COVID, I think in 2019.
Yeah, it was quite a while, yeah.
She had an exhibit at the Marion Cross School.
Yeah, right across at the park over here for the Norwich Art Festival.
And I fell in love with two of her paintings. One was a lynx lying down by a rock, and the other one was a fawn also lying down by a rock, which I got from my granddaughter. And I took a card and I promptly lost it. But my friend Nancy kept her card, and when it came time that I realized I do have a book, I wonder who could illustrate it. She said, here, call her. And she's got a delightful gallery on the way up the Kangamangas Trail in North Woodstock, New Hampshire. And,
yeah, it's a studio. It's like my working studio and a gallery. So it's got my work. My husband's a wood turner, so his things are in there as well. And a couple other artist friends, but that's where I sell a lot of my work. I'm also in the Long River Gallery down in White River Junction too.
And we got together as a team probably after about the third or fourth draft of the book. I had it spirally bound, and I brought it up to North Woodstock and gave it to Jeanette, and we had a discussion about what I thought would work, what she already had that she had drawn, and what she didn't have that I thought was necessary for the book. And we worked back and forth electronically. She would send me an image, and I'd look and think, oh, well, the tail could be a little longer, or the wings could be a little shorter. And remarkably, she didn't go crazy. And I just think the book is so much better for these illustrations.
It was really delightful working with Ted. I've always wanted to illustrate a book, so when he called me about it, I thought, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. This is perfect. You know, it fits exactly what I do for my work. It'll be a good fit for his book. And I thought, all right, I'll work on these illustrations. And he gave me one of the drafts of his book, and it's behemoth, you know. And he had given me a whole list of different sections in the book that I should refer to. So I would read them, and that would sort of give me an idea of what I should draw for each section. And then I would give Ted, you know, 1 to 2 or 3 images to pick from, and then he would decide which ones he liked best for that particular chapter. And so we'd go back and forth on that. It was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, she did a map, a quasi Winnie the Pooh-esque map of me walking my dogs down Five Corners Road in Thetford Center. And I was sending copies, you know, digital copies of the map to my 2 boys, one in Washington and one in Colorado. And they were commenting about the shape of the road and where the streams came in. So it was kind of
And he'd come back to me, okay, can you change this? This needs to be a little bit rounder here. This needs to be a little bit higher. And so, yeah. But it was fun to do. I was like, a Winnie the Pooh map. So I had to go online. I'm like, it's been years since I've looked at Winnie the Pooh. So I had to look up a Winnie the Pooh map. Oh, okay, I can do that.
Well, I can give you a sense of the book just by reading portions of the prologue. And this was more or less an everyday event for 18 months during COVID. Of course, I won't be reading anything if I can't find my glasses. Oh, here they are. And, you know, every day in this journal, memoir, natural history, whatever we want to call it, I found a quote that I thought matched what I was doing or thinking that day. And I've kept hundreds of quotes on note cards in a desk drawer for years. And then those I didn't have, I went online and Googled topics that I was writing about to see what people wrote about and said. And I just chose quotes from those. So that was as much fun as doing the writing, actually. So this is a prologue, and I begin with Albert Einstein. The pursuit of truth and beauty is a sphere of activity in which we are permitted to remain children all our lives. I boarded a crowded plane in the wee hours of the 14th of March, 2020, having spent 12 days in Costa Rica ignoring the media, in the company of 14 naturalists, hummingbirds, macaws, and rainbow-colored frogs. I wasn't disquieted by the mention of COVID-19. The coronavirus was an Asian problem, a European problem, remote from the remoteness of jungle twilight and its enhancement of bright green moths. I had just finished guiding a nature tour with my Costa Rican friend Gil Calvo Morea. Gil had piloted 6 tours with me in the past 20 years. He's ample, affable, highly energetic, ambassador for everything Costa Rican, a natural historian par excellence. Like a godwit migrating over open ocean, Gil imbues unshakable confidence and self-acceptance. He laughs easily, leads tours with lighthearted dignity, molds strangers into friends, friends into family, family into a nucleus of one. Our family ate together, hiked together, debated the identity of unknown birds and butterflies, watched a resplendent quetzal stir dawn with long green pendant plumes, each thin as a twizzle stick. After 12 days, we became acculturated, assimilated, associated, a tender mobile unit verging on dispersal. Then our sad goodbyes. My God, we had no idea what was behind the curtain. Travel weary and virus conscious, I reached East Central Vermont late that afternoon. In the interest of a ventilator-free existence, my personal geography shrank. I was a self-employed, free-ranging naturalist home in an empty house. I sheltered in place from the 15th of April until the 15th of April, 2021, 13 months, 394 days, 9,456 hours, 567,360 minutes, drifting between rooms, discovering the joys and frustrations of Zoom. I taught myself to make graham cracker pie crust, seared scallops, shrimp rolls, garlic-encrusted cod, ginger salmon, and chicken in cider. To stay mentally and emotionally afloat, to create order through repetition and output, I tried to be a homebound Joe DiMaggio, dependable, productive, generating a seemingly unstoppable string of hits, but with a much better eye for wildlife. In time, notwithstanding, urgencies mounted. I began to hate my furniture, notably the living room sofa and the dining room table, and I craved physical contact, especially after the Colorado birth of my granddaughter, Isabel Linney. Nonetheless, the landscape of COVID-19's new normal offered a comforting prospect directly in my sightline. To stave boredom and favor creativity, I immersed myself in the art of time. I walked at sunrise, daily tapping notes into my cell phone that I recast into a journal post for 2 birding listservs, one regional, the other statewide. Unconsciously, I had recreated the zen of stillness. The spin of the earth is sensed from the corner of a single valley, feasting on the vagaries of dawn and the delicacy of the seasons. German shepherds on leashes, tails in compliance, I'd walk downhill along a curving dirt road, past rocky streams and fallen trees, and gaze across an unblemished marsh and a man-made pond, looking deeply into a landscape I thought I knew. I fed off sunrise like a dog at dawn for nearly 400 consecutive days. Then I left for Colorado to meet my granddaughter. When I returned, like DiMaggio, I began another streak. Encouraged by friends, the journal evolved into a blog, oh, I hate that word, called Homeboy at Home during the coronavirus, published in a Substack newsletter. 1 hour walking, looking, considering, then 4 or 5 hours writing. My morning activities had centered me, had given me purpose, order and beauty, an outlet for my emotions, something I looked forward to during a time clouded with uncertainty. Homeboy grew a small, loyal following. Once a week, a regular online newsletter called Daybreak posted the link. Friends of friends began to forward Homeboy. Eventually, it appeared in the inboxes of homebound readers in more than 20 states and foreign countries. I chronicled the vagaries of dawn, the writer writing, interpreting the wind. I gained a sense of purpose in a time of purposelessness. Process yielded outcome, and I craved both. Both were inextricably linked. Walking begot writing, and writing begot an audience that nourished me with correspondence. Bewitched by sunlight and clouds, my quarantining at home had become more heartfelt than heartache, more joyous than tragic, more centering than scattering. To reacquaint with little things long ignored and bigger things long taken for granted, the entire and ongoing saga of my valley, ceiling to floor, had become a collateral gift to staying put. I began to engage my home ground, childlike awareness, the open-eyed observer, awed by the ordinary, stunned by the exotic. Cedar waxwings eating blackberries became provisional art. A bobcat in the alders became sacred. Every walk had been substantially different, each an endless manuscript, multi-authored by clouds, trees, flowers, streams, mammals, amphibians, turtles, and birds. Edited by the seasons and the earthly trends, some surreptitious, some blatant, some mysterious. Snakes made cameo appearances, solemn as prophets, unspooling on the fringe of the narrative. Insects hijacked some of the many plot lines, narrative threads like cloudscapes, unstable and ever evolving. Things too small to describe may have composed the ending. Although I saw a very small part of my valley's improbable and dependable details, what tethered me to these walks was the predictability of change, a fathomless, reassuring commodity, and, when I returned home, the joy and struggle of expressing what I saw and felt, and what it all evoked. I tried to channel the vitality of the morning, to paint with words, to freely associate, to hack through the underbrush of my own history. Chickadees, companionable and busy, cinched the seasons. When one sang on a frigid January morning, thin breaths rising like smoke, I glimpsed spring, a gray feathered promise. Snapping turtles, goshawks, and loons took stage in the wings, sometimes commandeering my attention by absentia. I roamed the valley for more than a year, happily engaged in a second childhood of my own making, witnessing and participating in the profound and gorgeous forces of life, thriving on the consistency of ritual. Do many of you know Five Corners Road in Thetford Center? Yes, I imagine some do. I have a short piece that describes the neighborhood, but basically I took the same walk every day with my German Shepherds, whose names I don't mention until the epilogue. And for reasons I have no idea why, but it's the way it turned out. But we walked down the road. I did what I did on my phone. They did what they did, sniffing and spelling and relieving themselves. And then we walked home again. It took about an hour. And we passed two streams, which two are permanent, and several intermittent streams. So I had a rhythm in my writing of leaving at sunrise, describing how different the sunrise was time-wise from the day before, and what the temperature was, the wind direction, what was going on in those streams, what was going on in the intermittent streams, the permanent streams, the pond, and the marsh. And then I'd come off on whatever theme caught my mind for the day. But for those of you unaware, and those of you who want to revisit Five Corners Road in prose, this is a very brief history of place, which sets up all the rest of this will, except for the epilogue, will be daily accounts. And I don't do every 526 days. Some days have been jettisoned, some days have been expanded, some days have been merged. So there was a minor element of fiction involved in all this. But I promise you I didn't make anything up. A brief history of place. In October 1997, Linny and I and our boys, Casey 10 and Jordan 2, moved to a geographic bump on the eastern flank of Robinson Hill within the village of Thetford Center in the town of Thetford in a county called Orange. Surrounded by overproductive oaks and underproductive lawn, our house looked down on 65 acres of marsh, a fusion of unkept reeds and aisles of sweet gale, a drainage basin for both water and cold air. Channels laced the marsh, peppered with pools, paved with boot-sucking mud. Several dead pines, barkless and branchless, enticed raptors to pause, to gather thoughts and ignite the valley with primeval cries. Not a house marred our view, yet Thetford Elementary School is only 4 miles away and the interstate a mile farther. Linny loved the landscape and had eyed the property for nearly 20 years. When it was rumored that Wes Kelly had planned to sell, she pounced. And so, for 24 years, I lived in the company of loons and bitterns. 5 miles to the east, the Connecticut River separates Vermont from New Hampshire. A 400-mile-long, south-flowing umbilicus that drains 4 states and feeds Long Island Sound, scraps of our valley. Less than a mile to the north, Lake Fairleigh hosts 5 historic summer camps. I'm close enough to the village of Post Mills to hear church bells and the combustible sigh of hot air balloons that launch from the tiny airport between the cemetery and the Little League field. On a clear day 40 miles away, Mount Ascutney teases the horizon. More afterthought than keynote, far beyond the domination of Gove Hill, which lords over Thetford. The slightest breeze and haze screens Ascutney. The sun and the morning star set over Guile Mountain. Although labeled Gillette Swamp on the U.S. Geologic Survey's Lime Quadrangle, Casey and Geordie renamed our valley Coyote Hollow because the wild dogs sang the night we moved in. Hemming the marsh, technically an intermediate fen, peaty, alkaline, nutrient poor, are alders along the east and north, evergreens along the west and south. 2 brooks flow off the western face of Robinson Hill, another off the steeper, rockier eastern face, and unload their freight in the marsh. All 3 braid together into the main channel, which bisects the marsh before pouring out of the wreckage of an old beaver dam and coalescing into an unnamed brook that feeds the east branch of the Pompanousek River 2 miles away. We moved to Coyote Hollow in 1997. The water level was much higher. Beaver, a keystone species as important to the Northeast as bison were to the Great Plains, had incised a dozen shallow passages into the peat and maintained the outlet dam, which backed water up to the edge of our lower pasture. Casey and I snorkeled the main channel, 4 feet deep and decorated with water lilies. Jordan directed traffic from a kayak. Back then, marsh wrens and snipe nested in the cattails. 7 muskrat houses rose out of the reeds. Mink birthed in the derelict beaver lodge. On spring nights, windows open, I'd fall asleep serenaded by snipe and bittern. Windows didn't need to be open to hear frogs, 6 different species. Wandering moose gazed the lilies. Wandering eagles and ospreys studied the water, anticipating fish which were scarce and tiny. Migrating kestrels hawked dragonflies and fed on the wing or hovered above the reeds, laser eyes searching. Flying ants lured southbound nighthawks, and one cold December morning, an orbiting golden eagle took the measure of Coyote Hollow. When their food supply dwindled, the beaver left. Water levels fell, which ended kayaking and snorkeling. Wrens, snipe, and muskrat moved on. I haven't seen a moose in years. Bitterns, frogs, and red-shouldered hawks stayed. Itinerant otter and mink still follow the brooks. Deer still roam the interior of the marsh, still fawn on the Sweet Gale Isles, and barred owls and coyotes still continue to underscore the night, giving weight to the stars. My boys grew up in Coyote Hollow, played baseball, made music, helped in the garden, mowed the lawn, stacked the wood, fed the horses, the chickens, and the dogs. Caught frogs and snakes and smiling salamanders with cosmetic spots, netted hatchling turtles, threaded worms on fish hooks, watched fledgling grosbeaks beg for sunflower seeds. The boys hid beer in the woodpile, weed in the closet, behaved appropriately and inappropriately. Their boyhood triumphs and disappointments unfolded here, bloomed and faded like orchids. Coyote Hollow was their home ground, as the beaches and greenbelts and window wells of Long Island had been mine. Casey and Jordan have moved on to pursue their own dreams, to build their own lives. Linny died. On the 14th of March, 2020, just home from Costa Rica, I faced an empty house with a view, prepared to shelter in place unaccompanied, a nature writer whose last day job had been during the Nixon administration, who had freely roamed the hemisphere, a confidant of polar bears and eyelash vipers. Who among us, hunkered down at home, alone in the shadow of COVID, hollowed out and exhausted, hadn't longed for a hug after dark? I have a girlfriend with hazel eyes and a broad, fetching smile, an excellent fit for our similarities and differences. COVID tempered our relationship. When the pandemic landed, we had already been dating for 3 years. As a social worker, Nancy's work was deemed essential. When I returned home from Costa Rica, our relationship was mostly limited to incinerating the phone lines. When we got together, we were outside, socially distanced, until vaccinated, sitting around our front yards or wandering the back roads. Inside, we wore masks and barely touched, no exceptions. To compensate, I embraced the hills and the valley, the corrugated world I hadn't fully embraced for many years. To be clear, based on a pair of books I had written while living in the Hollow, I knew more about the Florida Everglades than I did about my own wetlands. I had associated more with timber rattlesnakes than my own backyard birds. But stuck at home for more than a year, I began to take solace from the rising sun, became a student, again, of a landscape so personal that sometimes it hurt to recall my own history. But chickadees, bless them, taught me to pivot. I became the beneficiary of chance and hope, saw myself again, flawed but striving, at play in a gorgeous and brittle world underwritten by joy and sadness, dependency and change. And this is Jeanette's playful illustration. I probably can't see it from there. This is my little neighborhood, and these are my dogs. One is 134 pounds, the other was 122. Wow. And they're semi-well behaved. Nancy's disagreeing. But so from this point on until the epilogue, it's a day-by-day thing, and they're sequential. And the only one that's out of sequence is the introduction, because I'm sort of introducing myself as a human being and, my personal history, and introducing how the book is going to be laid out. And this is day 161, out of sync, an introduction. And it's Linny's 69th birthday. This is a Robert Frost quote. In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. 6:05 a.m., sunrise 1 minute later than yesterday, 63 degrees, wind south-southeast, 3 miles an hour. Sky, dispersing ground fog lifts, unveiling a lightly rubbled heaven, a mix of overexposed blue and wool white, hints of peach across the west. Permanent streams, upper, jittery, flow, flickering light, running out of water, lower, a single worried puddle, emblem of the parched summer. Wetlands, mist-softened colors. Across the marsh, a tree falls, fracturing the lullaby of the breeze. Pond, sans mist, sans most everything. No otter, no hooded merganser, no bittern. Except for errant methane bubbles and a lone turtle, a black shiny disk with little webbed feet, rising and sinking, a reptilian marionette. Frogs press against the shoreline like S&H green stamps to their pages. Boy, does that date me. Crickets, early morning's metronome. Alive on the road, 2 hermit thrushes wandering the edge. 2 little brown bats, constricted figure eights above the front yard, trolling for flying ants and mosquitoes, survivors of their own pandemic. A solitary tricolored bat, a tiny, very tiny bat, busily erratic, courses above the treetops. Looks like a hummingbird moth, a flesh-winged spark combing insects out of fertile airways. Tricolored bat, once known as the eastern pipistrelle, and the little brown bat, both victims of white nose syndrome, ignored social distancing at their own peril. Sound familiar? Mm. Chickadee rips breakfast out of a dewy spider web, then sings. Reminds me of midwinter, when spring was a dream. Why sing when the hollow braces for autumn? 3 peewees join in, slurred whistles, a dampened version of the plaintive summer song, equally longing, equally sad, simple to mimic. First winter wren I've heard in more than 2 months, a truncated version of the effervescent piccolo, which, when blended with the drumming of the far-off pileated, ushers me back to early May when the mornings were colder and birdsongs hotter. Winter wren and pileated, the fife and drum corps, an unexpected engagement. Catbird meows. Another pulse of red-breasted nuthatches passes through Coyote Hollow. Nasal calls roll off tree trunks like a flock of tricycle horns. Ovenbird, first I've heard in a month, sings a clipped version of Teacher, 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 more like Teach, 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 an encouraging note on the threshold of the weirdest school year I remember. Today's Linny's birthday. She would have been 69. When she died, I mourned what the boys had lost and lamented her absence from our lives, a litany of inconsolable everyday losses, my sorrow masked by the immersion in family survival. I skated around the depth of hope, staggeringly fragile, avoiding as best I could dwelling on personal loss. The closest of friends, companion, confidant, a fellow explorer of the recesses of the world. Oh, how I missed her burnt toast and her infectious laugh, so buoyant and contagious. But I had a ship to write and boys to grow. Casey and Jordan loved to travel, and for the most part, they were easy to travel with. Few complaints or outlandish requests. From the time they were infants, we took them everywhere. They nursed themselves to sleep in tents from Alaska to Newfoundland to the desert Southwest. A hint of campfire smoke lingered on their outdoor clothes. When Casey was 5 on a boardwalk in Florida, he lured a barred owl to within 5 feet, softly hooting from the seat of his bicycle. Jordan had never met a frog or a snake he didn't like, and he broadcast enthusiasm when he ever discovered a strange-looking insect. Although the boys loved the wonders of nature and appreciated life's grand diversity, for quite a while after their mother died, I hardly took them anywhere. Whenever we traveled as a family, Linny had been the organizer, the program director. I had been the consultant, the mule, the cheerleader. She would remember the toys, the books, the snacks, the toenail clippers. After she died, life without a compass seemed best lived closer to home. Travel did return to our lives, often with a vengeance, but the sense of loss still lingers. Yesterday, Casey and daughter-in-law Becky texted me the sonogram of a fetal heartbeat. I longed to see Linny's irrepressible smile. One more time, rising like the tide at the news she'd be a grandmother. 3 Phoebe chicks in the front yard apple tree, wings drooped and quivering, mouths cranked open like the sunrise colors, begging, begging, begging. I stop and watch Phoebe destiny, mostly moths, a steady procession of seasonal harvest. No matter how much I ache, I can't suppress smiling. Time has a way of passing a blunting loss, casting light across dark shadows, uncoiling the future. Ooh, that was tough to get through.
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah, many of the others are personal, but not necessarily so emotional. But that's generally how the book is going to go. And it starts, after that, it starts on day 1 and progresses to day 526. And you might think it interesting. I certainly did. I moved in the middle of all of it. I left Coyote Hollow and sold my home and moved to Hurricane Hill and White River Junction. So the book follows my moving and packing and what I'm seeing, and I carry on until Linny's 70th birthday on Coyote Hollow, or on Hurricane Hill and White River.
You moved during COVID?
I moved, yeah, near the end of COVID. I mean, my house was big, and it was really hard to keep it going by myself. I had somebody living with me, which was a help in some respects, particularly with my dogs. But, the mowing, the garden, everything was meant for a family of 5. And houses were going like hotcakes. And I thought, this is it. I'm ambulatory. I've got a strong back. This is the time I should do this, because 5 years from now, who knows if I'll be able to bend over and pick a box up. And, it was weird. I mean, people bought my house in 48 hours bidding from a cell phone.
Wow.
Oh, my.
And I was thankful. It was sold to a young couple with one little daughter and twins that came along about a year, 6 months later. And it's just perfect for a family of 5 with young kids. Mm-hmm. It was not perfect for a senior citizen alone, even though I still miss my view. Yes. Yeah. But I've got a couple other short pieces to read. I think if I had to say one thing that I saw that was most amazing to me was a bobcat. I had never seen one in Vermont before.
I don't think I have it on the board, Ted.
Oh, yeah, Jeanette's bobcat is priceless. There is so much detail in it.
What page is it?
It's page 298, day 352. And this is a quote from Robertson Jeffords. The lifespan of a particular plant or animal appears not as a drama complete in itself, but only as a brief interlude in a panorama of endless change. And if you don't know Robertson Jeffords, Not Man Apart was a line from one of his poems and became David Brower's second love after the Sierra Club. 6:20 a.m., sunrise 2 minutes earlier than yesterday, 24 degrees, wind northwest 6 miles per hour. Sky unlidded, half moon, bright as polished silver, slightly west of center, alone in blue simplicity. A short wall of lavender gray clouds hugs the horizon east to west on the move, disassociating and enlivening. An atmospheric chameleon, lavender becomes pink, gray becomes white, permanent streams. Otter followed the lower stream out of the marsh, under the road, and up the valley's eastern wall. Paired prints, bigger than the minks, show webbing. Long, muscular steerage tail feet uphill, cut the snow like dragging a stick. With little to fear of the night, the otter completed an unhurried, unharried ascent. Wetlands, broken clouds sail east, still suggesting pink. The serpentine drainage path of the marsh visibly dents the snow like the tail drag of an otter. From the inside of the far shore, pileated drums lights tempo. Cries of a companionless jay, pond, coyote, and fox tracks. Full of surprise, bleak marsh comes to life, sunly. While the dogs sit on the edge of the road, preoccupied with treats, Bobcat walks through the alders 30 feet away. Silent feet, coat of twilight, face like a soiled, frayed softball, sideburns flare, ears straight up, searchlight eyes, mustard color and slashed by vertical pupils, the original cat's eye marbles. A solitary wildcat keeps his own company, never looks up. Unintentionally, the bobcat turns a day joyous. I whisper, Bobcat. Not wanting to fracture the moment, I never lift my binoculars. I just watch and breathe. Bobcat walks smoothly and effortlessly through the alders into the cattails and across the narrow south end of the marsh, never looks back, vanishing into the reeds like a hallucination. I'm ghosted. Drumming pileated jars me out of feline delirium. Jays gossip, crows converse, titmice and chickadees whistle, hairy woodpecker drums, and me, still lost in a bobcat moment, the morning's embellishment. Yesterday, I backtracked the otter down the lower stream into the marsh. Otter bounded, slid on a toboggan belly, went for a swim, emerged through the snow, mud on the rim of the hole. In the snow tunnels, a toilet filled with scraps of crayfish, claws, and carapace. Nearly 12 months at home in the company of goshawks, otters, mink, bobcat, solitary sandpipers, crossbills, Connecticut warbler, great horned owl, hatchling milk snake, snapping turtle as big as a sink, courting bald eagles and mating crows, and all day, every day, the delicate companionship of chickadees, the fortunate upside during an unfortunate downturn. Yeah, a friend of mine asked me when he got a copy of Promise, why there are so many of Jeanette's illustrations of chickadees. And I could simply say that, A, I saw them every day. They were friendly.
And who doesn't love a chickadee?
Yeah.
Right.
They were just there to watch. I mean, you know, I could see them feeding their young. I could see them mating. I could see males chasing off interlopers. And they were arm's length away almost every single day. So I couldn't help but keep referring to them because they were just such a big part of
Right.
my walks. So I'm going to read a paragraph or two to finish out the bobcat from other days. And this is 2 days later, day 354, 6th of March, 2021, and Walt Whitman. The trick is, I find, to tone your wants and tastes low down enough and make much of negatives and of mere light in skies. 48 hours out, I still think about the bobcat, locked in my mind's eye, padding across the snow, passing through the alders, a gray ghost on long legs, a nameless solitary wanderer, cat not meant to be seen, a shadow hunter, resident bordering on austerity. Wait, 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 and pounce. Dogs don't share my enthusiasm. They sit in the viewing sight, biscuits on their brains, while I wait for the bobcat. Thursday, when the cat jarred the bleakness of an early March, time froze substantially like the marsh itself. My breath crept, my heart raced. I had waited nearly half a century to see a Vermont bobcat. Sadly, 22 years late to tell Linny, so I told our boys. Very soon, Casey on the edge of fatherhood will understand the joy of storytelling, the pleasure of showing and sharing the wonders of seeing the world through virgin eyes, the landscape of learning. Bobcat flipped my switch and turned my eyes youthful, opened me to thought-free observation, and for a magical moment infused me with the miraculous, realigning me with the pace of life in the manner of a baby's smile. Then, even 2 days after that, I'm still thinking about the bobcat. And this is day 356, the 8th of March, 2021, Rachel Carson. The lasting pleasures of contact with the natural world are not reserved for scientists, but available to anyone who will place himself under the influence of earth, sea, and sky and their amazing life. Yesterday afternoon, I could not help myself. I entered the marsh, went directly into the alders, seeking a ghost. 4 days behind the bobcat, but I'm still overflowingly curious. Cat walked among the alders as though the branches were invisible. I stumbled, broken branches in my wake. Bobcat entered the cattails, crossed the marsh narrows behind the decrepit beaver dam, followed the west shore north in the shadow of hemlock and pine where the pileated holes court. Cat preferred the shadows, preferred moving. Found a friend, a smaller bobcat, and together they climbed the broken framework of Robinson Hill into the rocky ledges and talus, a crepuscular couple planning for the future. Across the globe, there are 4 species of wildcats in the genus Lynx: Iberian lynx, Eurasian lynx, Canada lynx, and bobcat, aka red lynx. The most common wildcat in North America. Some 2.5 to 3.5 million roam the United States. Only Delaware, Alaska, and Hawaii are without. Although bobcats rove up to 40 square miles, their defensible territories are less than 100 acres. Sexes are polygamous, often mating with several partners. For bobcats, the summer of love is late winter. Otherwise, adults are secretive, solitary, nocturnal hunters. Who would I prefer to track bobcats with? Charles Darwin, Theodore Roosevelt, John Burroughs, perhaps Rachel Carson? Darwin would have beguiled me with talk of natural selection and biological meaning of love. Roosevelt had the stamina and determination to track the cats over the hill into the next valley. I would cajole him into protecting the glacially inscribed landscape for generations of bobcats and people. Burroughs would have transformed our walk into lyrical prose, and Carson would have fused science and art into an irresistible whole, into a sense of wonder. There are uncharted paths beyond my doorstep, and every morning, in every way, as dark yields to light, I take Coyote Hollow's treble hook and swim downstream, boyishly noshing on daybreak's residual gifts. Walking home cocooned in the sounds of March, I realized the bobcat, beast of a 10-second glimpse, had entered the realm of personal mythology. I conjure him up, a trophy, a glorified memory, the way I once conjured up a golden rattlesnake with chocolate bands basking on the stone foundation of a long-forgotten farmhouse in the woods outside Elmira, New York. Or 50 years ago, while hitchhiking across the country, an eye-level scarlet tanager perched in a wretched downpour in a Wisconsin scenic pullout. My ride, a coast-to-coast trucker, had never before enjoyed a bird except between slices of toast. Deliciously drenched, we returned to the truck, puddles on the floorboard, and talked tanager and headed west. So I would love to answer questions. I can keep reading.
Question? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Is it okay to ask questions?
Yeah, I want you to ask questions.
Yeah, okay, so as you're taking a walk and all the things that you bring back with you, did you take notes?
Yeah, I took them in my cell phone.
Oh, okay, so that's how you did that.
I punched notes in my cell phone, phrases, nouns and verbs,
Uh-huh.
And then I sat down and tried to, put it together and be as creative as I possibly could be about it.
Great, that's good. Thank you. I'm a writer and I've done one book and I just finished my second one. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, so I'm very curious how you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, this was different. Remember, this was not ever intended to be a book when I started.
Yeah, I understand.
So I was just kind of taking notes, thinking I was putting them on the Upper Valley Birding Listserv and the Vermont Birding Listserv. That's literally what I did for 2 months.
Yeah.
And then I thought, Daybreak was interested, and so they wanted me to put it on Substack. One thing led to another, and I thought if I'm putting this out to a world of people I don't really know, I should add more to it. And then I started, coming up with themes for days, and so it took a long time before I ever realized that there was a book being made.
Right.
It was the unintentional book. Yeah.
Two questions, one about craft and another about not so wild animals. One of the things that I found captivating was that sometimes you use lists of things, lists of birds, or lists of things that you saw, usually more than 3 but less than 7. And I'm wondering how studied that was as a writer, with the craft of writing, being aware of using lists, never more than 1 in a day, and probably no more than 2 per week, but there were lists.
Yeah, well, I don't know how to answer that, Don. Yeah, it's, well, first of all, I never studied writing. I studied, I was a scientist all the way. I dropped out of a PhD program in mammalogy and got a master's from Antioch in environmental science. So whatever I bring to writing comes from just reading all the time.
You mastered, I think, the use of the list.
Maybe I should find one and read it.
And then the other question about not so wildlife, you always kept your dogs on leash. And could you just sort of talk about that a little bit? Because often people, when they're out walking in an area where they're not going to encounter other people, they take their dogs, they let their dogs off leash.
Well, there's many reasons they're on leashes. One is they're very big. And if a deer bolted across the road, sometimes they would chase after it, sometimes they wouldn't. And I wanted to be in control of them so I could have the time to sit and write and think about what I was looking at. Now I'm down to 1 dog, and that 1 dog is crippled, so he doesn't chase anything, so he's never on a leash. So yeah, it's yeah. I mean, if they had seen that bobcat, I'm sure they would have perked up and gone after it.
Yep.
And I've watched otter, I've watched mink, and when I was at the goshawk nest, I spent a couple 3 weeks with a family of goshawks up on top of the Robinson Hill. I never took them for fear of annoying the birds. But yeah, they were part of it. And sometimes I'd step on the leashes if I was using the binoculars, or I'd make them sit. And they even tolerated me picking morels. Yeah, they were easily amused. Red squirrels would be clipping green pine cones from the white pine trees, and they'd be splashing down on the road, and they'd get all excited. And that would keep them busy for quite a while. So how are we doing on time? Yeah.
I was just wondering, you write so beautifully about the animals around your home, and I was wondering whether you think that maybe being confined to your home pretty much during COVID and not having the usual kinds of stimulation that you would have otherwise, whether that kind of sharpened your powers of perception or just.
I'm sure it
Yeah.
did. I'm sure it did. Because I really had nothing more to do during the day.
Yeah. Some silver lining maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt, that's true. I've never had that kind of an experience before, of day in and day out, constantly. Yeah.
After the height of COVID subsided to now, to the present, what does your relationship look like with walking? Has it
I
changed?
walk every day still. But I write for my Substack journal once, twice a week at most. It's not an everyday writing anymore. Mainly because the book was being produced and I had to put a lot of time into that. But yeah, I still continue it. Yeah.
My question has to do with the event that was not on a morning walk and less than a year ago, but I'm wondering through the lens that you see natural events, where did you watch the eclipse? What'd you think?
Well, I tell you, I thought more of the total lunar eclipse last month, because I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and stood and watched it, and I wrote about that in Substack, and Jim Block graciously let me use several of his photographs, which were gorgeous. But the total solar eclipse, I have a major regret that I didn't go see it. I mean, I saw it as a partial solar eclipse on Hurricane Hill. And I was volunteering at the Haven that day, and I felt guilty about not going at the last minute. And I kept waffling. And, a friend's father had come up from Northfield, Mount Hermon, and was taking him up there. And they asked me if I wanted to get in the car and go with them. And I thought, I just can't tell the Haven I'm not going to go 5 minutes before I'm due to go there.
Yeah.
So, but I still regret doing it. And if it happened again, I think I would tell them I'm not coming. Everybody else seems to tell them that.
Maybe we'll
Well,
take one
call
more
it.
question, and then Ted and Jeanette will be able to sign your books up here.
Sure. Yeah, I have one last paragraph to read.
Great.
It's the last paragraph in the entire book, and it's, oddly enough, it's in the acknowledgments, but I think it's important. Nothing in my ragged life had prepared me for dating in my 70s, let alone falling in love. Day in and day out, Nancy Griffin suffered the rehash of my walks. She was and remains my language guru, dedicated to shortening my sentences. Shadowfax and Tanaya, and this is the only time I ever mention their names, gave me reason to walk. Good-naturedly, they tolerated long pauses, sitting patiently at my feet, enthusiastically accompanying me regardless of weather. Their senses extended my own. No one would confuse either German Shepherd for Rin Tin Tin. Their loyalty guided me through COVID-19. I'm grateful for Jordy and Casey, often and patiently listened to me read, frequently over the phone, commented on Jeanette's illustrations and the Coyote Hollow map, as well as my porous memory. My ultimate debt is to them and to my stepson, William. They grew up on the untamed shoulder of Robinson Hill, not exactly the children of wolves, just wild boys who fed off the corrugated landscape. And for 526 days, I tried to follow their example.
Very nice.
Well, thank you.